and welcome to the Change Life Destiny podcast series. Are you frustrated with the challenges of navigating our healthcare system? We understand, and that's why we're committed to sharing insights into the latest advancements and approaches that are reshaping healthcare. Join us as we explore the stories of practitioners and innovators who are leading the way toward a healthier future. Let's dive in and learn together. I am your host, Stephanie, and today we are with Dr. Jeffrey Gross of Recelebrate, and I couldn't be more excited because I'm in doing my research, I'm really thrilled that we are able to showcase what you're doing and what your story is here on our podcast. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my absolute honor and pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. We love it. We love it. Okay, well, why don't we start with you giving us a little bit of background? Tell us a little bit of your story and your journey of how you found yourself in this health space.
Well, I was practicing traditional medicine for many years, right from college to med school to residency to practice. And, I noticed a couple of things in that practice. And that was that doctors had no control anymore, really, of what was happening, that it was all cookbook forced upon us by those who pay for it, insurance companies who shouldn't be allowed to call themselves insurance companies because they're not really insuring anything but what they want to insure. And patients weren't happy, doctors weren't happy. And of course, the doctors take the blame, but it wasn't really the doctors, except we let it happen. And my patients were looking for options and answers for problems, and something that wasn't the same old thing for many years. It caused me to evaluate the kinds of things I was doing clinically in treating people that had not changed really in a material way for decades. It wasn't wrong. It was just not advancing where it should be and could be and was in other countries.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm a surgeon, and a lot of what I did was trying to help people not have surgery. But my patients would come in and say, well, all those things we tried weren't adequate, like the therapies, the medicines, the injections, the time, all that. And I'd say, well, we could talk about surgical options. And they'd say, well, I'm not that bad. And I'd say, good, because I didn't want to offer it to you anyway yet. And then they would say, but how do we fill this gap? Because I want something. How about lasers? How about this? How about stem cells? And you hear stem cells enough, and chance favors the prepared mind, because I have some background in molecular cell biology in college, but you kind of left it behind when you went to med school and residency, and you really didn't get to do much with it. But the nerdy part of me said, yeah, what about that? And instead of going to the stodgy old, neurosurgery conferences every year where people pat themselves on the back for doing the same thing over and over again, I went to some stem cell conferences, and I got re-educated and I got retrained, and I did it to offer it to my patients with spinal problems and other things, but it's blossomed into a whole new medical realm and sort of a version 2.0 of my practice. So that's how I got here.
I love that. I love that so much. It's almost like you took your moment to peek behind a different door. What's behind door number 2, and peek behind that other door and find that there's this completely different world of opportunity and option for you and for your patients. So I love that story. That is what we are all about. Some of my story is about that too. So I love that. So how does the regenerative treatment that you offer, how does it contrast? Go deeper into how does it contrast a little bit more with those conventional approaches?
Well, first, it's a more logical and natural approach, right? We're using what the body is teaching us, and we just know more about it now than we did maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Sure.
So we're looking at biological processes and leveraging that knowledge as a strategy to help something going on in the body that's the root cause of some problem, as opposed to just treating the symptoms. So I think first and foremost, it's natural. It's a root. It's addressing the the biological cellular causes of some problem. I think it's also important to note that it doesn't usually make money for big pharma or companies that make implants for surgery. So
Mm.
it pulls the rug out from the medical industrial complex. So why is it slow to take a foothold in America? That's probably why.
Right, right. Absolutely, absolutely. Those that hold the purse strings. That is very true. And I think that that is another thing that I'm finding is fantastic and wonderful about where we are in the world today, that more people are asking the questions, looking behind those doors, asking that of their practitioners as well. So I'm so glad that you did that. So, are there some shareable stories where stem cell treatments that you have offered have made a drastic difference in someone's life?
Well, sure. I mean, I have various stories, and just for educational purposes, these are anecdotal, right?
Right.
The FDA is not. It has said that we're not allowed to make any marketing claims. So none of this. This is for educational purposes
Correct.
and storytelling of some individuals. But I have, for example, I have an octogenarian sweet woman who has just osteoarthritic aches and pains throughout her body. She can't do her crafts. We've given her IV regenerative biologics, and 2 years at a time, she has significant reduction in her pain, improvement in the inflammation in her joints, and she can do things. And so it's keeping her more functionally younger of sorts by suppressing that inflammation. Some of my more exciting stories are when I take a knee that has cartilage degeneration, or what people call arthritis, when they
Mhm,
vaguely use that word or generally
mhm.
use that term, or their doctor says you have bone on bone, which is really the end stage of that. We've taken people like that. We've provided directly to specific locations in that joint based on targeting we do on some high quality MRI scans. And we've been able to show on MRIs afterward, not only do people feel better and function better, but the cartilage can actually regenerate and thicken. So,
Wow.
and I didn't invent this. I looked at all the best practices that were out there across the world, because most of them, frankly, were coming. The long follow-up studies come out of Europe and Asia,
Mhm.
because they've been doing this, two decades longer.
Nice.
So we emulate those protocols and are getting similar results.
That's incredible. That's
Yeah.
incredible, especially for someone who seemingly, because of whatever they've heard in their life, maybe feels that they do not have any options. To give someone the ability to have an option like this to where it rejuvenates their lifestyle.
Hi, everyone. Roxy here with the Change Life Destiny podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you're loving this episode. Just a quick note to let you know that if you enjoy the types of speakers and the content and the technologies that we're showcasing on this podcast, you will enjoy our Changing Life and Destiny conference, which happens annually in Dallas in April. And we'd love to have you there with us. Learn more at changelifedestiny.com and use the code podcast at checkout to get a very special discount. We hope to see you there on this movement to move our healthcare system to a preventative, proactive model. Now back to the episode.
I mean, goodness, that is what a
Yeah.
wonderful thing. Well, that's fantastic. I love hearing those stories, and frankly, I'm thinking of a couple of people in my life that might would be very, very happy to use your services and learn more about this. So, let's talk a little bit about technology. So, as medical technology improves and progresses, what do you think the future trajectory is of this longevity and regenerative medicine?
Well, longevity, you can't do regenerative medicine and not speak to longevity. So they
Sure,
go hand in hand, right? So
sure.
whether you're helping to help address a disease, slow a disease formation, prevent maybe disease if you're high risk, or even help, reverse it. What you're doing at the cellular level is really something that not only is to deal with the disease potentially, but to improve the cellular health and longevity of the person who owns the cells.
Got it.
So the anti-aging piece, the longevity and the health span piece they go hand in hand. So
Hmm.
whatever we're doing, some people come just for that. Some people come for a problem and they end up with a longevity plan. So I
Mm.
think first and foremost, people need to have a longevity plan, whether that's just behaving healthy, or eating right, or sleeping, or taking the right supplements, or exercising, what have you. That could be your longevity plan. But if unless you don't want to have longevity, then so you have to know how to, it's like Google Maps, right? How are we going to get to the destination? You need a plan, and you need to know how to get there without going out of your way. So there are simple things you can do, and then there all the way up through doing regenerative medicine, things that we do that involve adding biologics to the mix, not just diet, sleep, exercise, supplements, things like that. So, and that could be a very long conversation depending on the individual.
Yeah.
But we are seeing, and we don't have the long, decades long studies to look at all this. But if you look at the blue zones where people live to 100 and more, we're emulating some of the things that all the different blue zones overlap with. We're talking about omega-3, social interactions, sunlight, eating real healthy food that's not processed, and it doesn't have pesticides, things like that. So there are a lot of factors we're trying to emulate. But when we can't emulate them all, then we can sort of hack or biohack with the stem cell based biologics.
Okay, so talk a little bit more because I'm interested in knowing some of these differences. My husband and I watched some of the Blue Zone documentaries, and boy, is it fascinating, even down to just a simple thing in Okinawa where they don't really have chairs. You have to get up and down off the ground. You have to use your squat. They garden a lot, things like that that are more lifestyle and sort of
Yep.
easy fixes, if you will, that here in the States we just don't think about because we get really comfy couches that we like
Yeah.
to sit in. But speak a little bit more towards some of those easy lifestyle changes that can be made versus the biologics and where that comes into play.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, exercise, weight
Mm.
bearing exercise is probably the most important thing I can advise. Your muscle mass is related to your longevity. So the more muscle you have or maintain it, the longer you will live, and longer you will live healthy. Muscle releases myokines, which are little peptides and proteins that slow the development of dementia, stimulate the brain, stimulate the rest of the metabolism and things. So these are pro health. You can stimulate your own biologics and stem cells by doing exercise, and you can do it strategically. Weight bearing, you can do resistance bands, but it has to be weight bearing. An exercise cycle is not going to do it really,
Right.
because there's not enough stress on the bones. The other correlate with longevity is bone density,
Mm.
right? Why? And think about it. Most of your stem cells reside in your bone marrow. So if you stimulate your bone density, you're stimulating your own bank of stem cells. So if you exercise and you're stimulating your muscle mass, and you do it in a weight bearing way, you're stimulating your bone density as well. So those two things are crucial. So exercise. Now, as we age, our hormones tend to decline. In women, that's more precipitous at a certain age, or occurrence.
Mhm.
And men, it's more gradual. But we're seeing it earlier and earlier. And one theory is you flip that. Instead of, the hormones decline as we age, it's maybe we age faster because the hormones decline. So I'm a very big proponent of something very simple. It's called hormone optimization. The word replacement may not be proper, but we've debunked a lot of the myths associated with risk for women's cancers and things. And in most cases, you're not going to get this from your Kool-Aid drinking regular doctor. You have to go to a bioidentical hormone doctor. You can Google that, because you don't want horse urine estrogens and progesterones called Prempro. You want the same molecule your body makes.
Right.
And then you can help maintain a youthful cell activity. Having the right hormone balance is also anti-inflammatory, meaning it's anti-aging. So that's part of it. These are very simple things.
Mhm.
We become a little bit more insulin resistant with age, which means our metabolism is not working properly. So we're seeing a lot of benefit with use of the GLP-1 agonists, a peptide, not just for weight loss and diabetes, but for improvement of insulin sensitivity, slowing inflammation, and anti-aging. And we're going to learn more and more about that as they're on the world scene longer and longer. There was just a study published that in a population of those taking semaglutide or Ozempic, they had a reduced cancer incidence. So pay attention. This is not just an observation. This is the real deal. So, and then that brings us to peptides. GLP-1 is a peptide. There are many peptides that you can obtain and take to help support the body's functioning. Peptides, of course, are small proteins. And we have peptides are functioning all the time. We just don't always pay attention to them. Let's name some: oxytocin, melatonin, endorphin, and so on. Like these are molecules circulating in your body, or we take supplementary. Well, there are more. There are a lot more, and it's becoming more and more popular. And semaglutide is a peptide, for example, which is the generic for Ozempic.
Right.
Diet, we have to have our phytonutrients, our fruits and vegetables. We want to stay away from the pesticides, the glycophosphates, and things in plastic, the microplastics. I mean, we're poisoning ourselves, and hopefully there's a move afoot to clean up our food source, like in Europe. If you look at the ingredients of Oreos here in the U.S. and in Europe, they're very different.
Very different.
The laws in Europe are more pro-health, right?
Right.
And when all these things came around, it was about extending our food supply, making sure no one's starving. But that was 100 years ago. I don't think we have that, at least in America. I'm sure there are other places, that need food, but we can't poison ourselves either.
Right. And even if we do have a hunger issue, wouldn't it be better to feed people with products that are not going to poison them? Wouldn't that be a better idea? I don't know.
Gosh, you're using logic. This is crazy. I don't know. Yeah, of course. So
I don't know. I don't know anything, but well, that's fantastic. So it sounds like those are some guidance tools and tips for lifestyle. So let's switch over to the biologics. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, you really want to supercharge your longevity plan, fight inflammation, deal with a particular problem or part, and get some help from good old-fashioned biology. We tap into our own blueprint, right? We have the genes in our DNA to do what we need to do. This is not a new phenomenon, right? Our body, when we were younger, healed just fine, right? A little child gets a cut, mom cleans it up, puts the Band-Aid on it, kisses the child, sends the child on his way. 3 days later, the Band-Aid falls off in the bathtub and the scab is almost completely healed. Like, how? We don't do that. So we're tapping back into that ability is what we're doing. So biologics, and I, the phrase we all glom onto is stem cells, but stem cells themselves aren't necessarily doing all the work, right? There are other biologics like platelet-rich plasma, also known as PRP, which can come from your blood and concentrate some growth factors. There are stem cells. Stem cells can come from your own body or a younger donor, and I'll come back to that in a second. And then there are even something more, modern, and that's stem cell-derived exosomes. And exosomes are small vesicles that are secreted by cells. All cells make exosomes. And those small vesicles go to other cells, which take them in, and it's a communication from cell to cell. It's a way to either warn your neighbor cells or help them, join the party if the party is healing, if the party is fighting an invader, an infection, or if the party is regenerating in a youthful way. So we use those strategically. So stem cells can come from your body, but when you take your car to get the oil changed, you don't put the old oil back in it. Right. So I prefer the youthful, more active sources, and these are ethical. They come here in the U.S. from planned C-section donors. The mother has the baby, congratulations, and instead of discarding the amniotic fluid, the umbilical cord, parts of the placenta, they put it on ice in a sterile way, and they send it off to labs who are ironically FDA compliant and certified to process and screen these tissues. The labs I use don't have donors that have had the COVID vaccine. Not that that's a political statement, although it could be. It's meaning to say, because we just don't know enough, why chance it? So we're not using those. So most of the biologics I use come from these youthful donors.
Mm.
and the donors aren't paid. And also from these donors, we can get the amniotic fluid, which is rich in these stem cell derived exosomes and growth factors. So we get that, and they have certain advantages over stem cells. By the way, if I gave you stem cells and intravenous IV, those cells would be gone in 10 days, 14 days maybe, but they would deliver a longer lasting set of benefits because they're delivering their own exosomes. So we're just cutting out sometimes the middleman with the stem cells going right to the exosomes. So exosomes travel better through the body. They, in an IV form, they don't get hung up in the heart and lungs like stem cells do because cells are sticky. They do penetrate through the blood-brain barrier because they're so much smaller than cells, and they're easier to store and handle, and they're less than half the cost. So the costs have come way down of these things. So,
Wow. Okay, so it sounds to me like exosomes are, like you said, you're just cutting out the middleman.
correct. Now, some people believe stem cells may have the ability to, if you deliver them IV, to bind in places where in of need. They have receptors that look for inflammatory issues. Exosomes probably don't have that. So when you have a problem like a knee osteoarthritis, we have to deliver it directly to the knee. But they do that with stem cells anyway. So most of the things you do with stem cells, we do with exosomes, and we're seeing similar results. There's no real head-to-head competition or paper or study yet. But at the end of the day, when you get stem cells, you're getting exosomes delivered, stem cell derived exosomes.
Got it. Got it. And you're seeing just based on what you were saying before, some incredible results that truly, were not available before these delivery options were even thought of.
Not here in the US.
Yeah.
This has been going on for at least a couple decades. I mean, professional athletes have left this country, gone to Europe for, you know, a long time, and you can go to Mexico or Central America,
Mhm.
but we have them here. We just cannot advertise
Mm.
because the FDA has not approved these biologics for marketing claims. So even PRP is not approved for marketing claims, but oddly, health insurers and the bean counters and CPAs figured out that it's a lot cheaper than a knee surgery or an elbow surgery. So they're starting to pay for these things. So I think there's a move afoot to gain more acceptance here in the US.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I do believe that there is a population within those of us that are in the older generation, right? That are open and opening these doors, but I really do believe that those in the younger generation are not interested in continuing the path that we have that some have laid out, and are going to be part of that movement and momentum moving forward, which is a beautiful thing, especially for those of us that may have some sort of genetic mutation or something that you know there's so much more testing I find that's going on as well. And so
Yeah.
people are gaining more knowledge, but with that knowledge is that power of the knowledge, you then have to make a decision on whether or not you're going to do something about it.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so that's where people like you come in so very beautifully and handily, because then you can say, this is what you can do about it, instead of, well, this is your information and sorry for whatever it is. Well, that's wonderful. So, is there anything else that we've missed that you feel like is just a really important nugget for people to understand to bridge the gap in between maybe those that are starting to open the door and starting to understand?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Well, a few different items. First that comes to mind is I've had patients come talk to me for an opinion.
Mm,
Someone may be looking at a knee replacement and they're trying not to have it.
mm,
That's kind of my low hanging fruit kind of a patient, spine or joint problem. And they'll see me and I'll say, well, we can try, these regenerative biologics. We have some interesting results. I'll show you some examples. It's an option. You can also have surgery. You can have a knee replacement or what have you. They'll go back to their orthopedic surgeon, and they'll ask, what do you think about that stem cell stuff? And the orthopedic surgeon, we're not ready. It's unproven. And they throw around these words that just frankly aren't true.
right.
And honestly, 6 or 7 years earlier, before I made this 180-degree turn in my practice, I may have said the same thing. Hey,
Sure.
I don't know. I'm not ready. It's not prime time, but that's wrong. So if your doctor says that, it's a closed-minded conversation. seek opinions from doctors who at least go, I'm not sure, I'm not trained in that, but go get an opinion in that, and if your doctor's closed-minded, it's probably not a conversation that's fully suiting you and across the breadth of options. So get all the options out there, talk to a lot of doctors. You can find stem cell driven doctors on the internet here in the US and see what the options are. And if they say, oh, you're bone on bone, you don't have any cartilage, we've seen crazy great results in some cases. Not everybody, but some cases. So why not try an injection before you have a knee replacement,
Sure.
So,
Sure.
so
I
I
love
see.
that too. I love that thought that, and I heard something very interesting today, and it was about the amount of wisdom that we continue to cultivate in our lives. And so if we're not open to the wisdom coming to us, then yes, we're going to be closed-minded, because that's just in medical terms, that's a compendium we are working with.
Right.
But the more that we open the door and allow the wisdom in, I love what you're saying though about making sure that, if it's in it, recognizing whether it's in their best interest or not. So, okay, well,
Right.
what else would you suggest?
Well, I think if you've got an issue or a problem that's not figured out and you're just getting sort of the quick dismissal, keep looking. Similarly to my last opinion, have someone keep figuring it out. Look deeper. I've been more and more impressed with, functional medicine doctors and naturopathic doctors. Good old Western medicine is not the only way.
Mhm.
And sometimes you just need someone willing to keep digging
Mm,
and try things. And medicine is an experiment, in the patient, it is a practice
mm.
and it's not perfect, but you got to keep trying if you've got an issue. Or, a lot of, I see this over and over again, people, especially ladies that in their 50s and 60s, and they never had this, their doctor never asked them about all kinds of symptoms that might be, simply dealt with the right hormone optimization or things like that. So I feel really bad for those people.
Yeah.
You're the Kool-Aid drinking institutionalized doctors who are just, playing in the orchestra, and it's the tail is wagging the dog here, and it's all
Mm.
driven by, what the insurance will approve, not maybe necessarily what's best for the individual.
Right, right. And that is a shift of mindset, I do believe, from a business perspective too. When there is a practitioner that opens up a practice, there's only so much that they've been educated on, let's say, about building a business. And there is a choice as to whether or not you're going to build a business and again allow the tail to wag the dog, or if you're going to try to do something a little bit different and really be in it for other reasons, which include the best service to your patient. So that's wonderful. Okay, so when it comes to root cause and prevention, which is that's what Changing Life and Destiny is all about, is allowing people to be empowered with education about these root cause prevention methods. So what would you say is if you had your dream of what the future would look like, what would it be?
From the preventative side, we need to fix our food source
Mm,
and have more European style laws, get all the crap out of our food. We need to eat real food,
mhm,
not all this, grain fed, beef and chickens and things like that.
mhm,
From the individual standpoint, we need to do better with our protein intake. We
mm,
should not be having carbs for breakfast.
mm.
We should not be eating after dark.
Ooh, I
We
like
are
that
not
rule.
meant, our cells are meant to rest and repair and regenerate in the dark. And we need to wind down mentally and physically and turn off screens that falsely stimulate our retina and go to bed hungry. And
Mm.
that those are some simple things. Of course, the exercise. Maybe we should get rid of our chairs. I mean, you made me think earlier about that brand, Lazy Boy Recliner. I mean, the whole name should say something to
Right,
Americans right
right.
there.
Hello.
So,
Oh, yes. Oh, and those are simple. Not all of it is simple. Changing our food sources, that's not necessarily, it's not going to be the simplest change for some people because of what their patterns are, their habits are. But there are options and there are places where you can purchase these types of items so that you can cook better. I just was recently at another location, another conference where there were these young men that were probably in their 20s, and they have created a solution so that you can get back to some simple ingredients that can get you some super highly nutritious food and teach yourself how to cook again. I mean, I'm guilty. I'm a mother. I am horrible about cooking, but I need to get, that is something that, and learning the holistic approach to cooking too is so
Yeah.
important, that it's not just about what you're putting in the pan, but the pan itself is important as well.
Right.
So that's wonderful. Okay. Well, I, we will put all of the links for where people can find you in the show notes, how they can get in touch with you. I think that this is something that you're providing such a special service for people who are open, who are listening, who do want something different with their health care and with the outcome. So, thank you so much for being here today, for giving us your time and your talent and your energy and sharing your story with our podcast listeners. And we hope that this helps everyone that's listening, and go find Dr. Gross. He can probably help you.
I'd like to try. Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Awesome. Okay. What? Thank you for tuning in to the Change Life Destiny Show. We hope you found today's conversation enlightening and empowering. Be sure to join us each week for more thought-provoking discussions and inspiring stories. Don't miss out on staying up to date with the latest in healthcare innovation. Subscribe to our podcast and visit us at changelifedestiny.com to explore more about the practitioners, technologies, and how you can take control of your health journey.